Let's look at my two most intriguing college football teams. First, I will poke some holes in a primary national title contender, but also acknowledge that the coach might have elevated this program. Second, we'll talk about the team in which history is pulling it in one direction, but NFL talent is pulling in the other. Let's go. Last season, I had Texas overrated at 4th in the AP poll. My argument was twofold. First, my numbers suggested that they weren't that great the prior season. They were 9th when I looked at an ensemble metric that I used to rate teams for the season. And then second, they lost 11 players to the NFL draft on a team that wasn't elite. I was wrong. Texas made the playoff. Once they got there, they got wins over Clemson and Arizona State before losing to eventual champion Ohio State. Now, Texas starts the season at number 1 in the preseason AP poll. Everyone is all in on Arch Manning at quarterback. It would have been easy to call them overrated, especially when they're number 3 in my member college football rankings to start the season. More on why I didn't do that later. But first, let's talk about Arch. We only have a limited sample size of pass attempts for Arch last season, but let's evaluate him anyways. We'll look at yards per pass attempt. These include negative plays from sacks, and Arch Manning was excellent last year. He threw for 9.4 yards per pass attempt, which was significantly better than the college football average of 6.4. And he was significantly better than the Texas starter last year, Quinn Ewers. Ewers threw for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Arch Manning looks pretty good in the raw numbers. However, we need to account for schedule. Ewers faced Georgia twice and Ohio State. Manning had starts against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC. At the power rank this offseason, I started taking yards per pass attempt for quarterbacks and adjusting for the defenses that they faced. Not surprisingly, Ewers gets a big bump up. He is predicted to throw for 7.5 yards per pass attempt against an average FBS defense. And not surprisingly, Arch Manning gets bumped down. He is predicted to throw for 6.8 yards per pass attempt against an average FBS defense. Ewers was better than Manning when you look at my mathematical schedule adjustments. I don't want to make too big a deal about a small sample size of Arch Manning. He had 96 pass attempts last season. Manning could be great. Manning could win the Heisman. But we should also ask this question. If Arch Manning is so great, why couldn't he beat out Quinn Ewers for the job last season? Ewers was good, but he dropped to a 7th-round pick in the NFL draft. Now, all of a sudden, Arch Manning is supposed to be the first overall pick in the 2026 draft. Something doesn't quite make sense, and this is an issue that deserves some contemplation. Last year, I made the argument that Texas lost a lot of talent to the NFL, and that's why they wouldn't be as good. I could certainly make the same argument this season. They had 12 players drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. That was even more than 11 the previous year. This has to matter, right? Let's break it down. And let's get into specific position groups. First, we'll start on the offensive line. 3 starters got drafted, and this includes Kelvin Banks Jr. at 9th overall. There was a 4th starter on the Texas offensive line that was signed by Tampa Bay as a free agent. Guard DJ Campbell is the only starter to return, and he is projected as a mid-round NFL pick for next season. They will have 4 new starters from within the program. Offensive tackle Trevor Gooseby is considered a sleeper NFL pick, according to some analysis by ESPN. The offensive line in 2025 is going to try to do what the defensive line did last season. Coming into last season, in 2024, Texas lost 2 starting defensive tackles to the NFL draft. And these were very high draft picks. Byron Murphy II went 16th overall. Tavondre Sweat went 38th overall in the 2nd round. You might have expected a drop-off, but there wasn't. They promoted 2 players from within the program at defensive tackle, and these 2 guys left as high draft picks last year. Alfred Collins was 43rd overall in the 2025 draft. That was the 2nd round. And then Vernon Broughton was drafted in the 3rd round. It seems a little bit more iffy that Texas is going to get the same type of defensive tackle play this season. They did go to the transfer portal at this position, and they got players from Purdue and Syracuse. From my research, neither seems to have NFL potential at this point. The defensive line also brings back players like edge rusher Ethan Burke. He had 19 pressures in a limited number of snaps last season, but he is considered to have a late-round NFL grade. You can make the argument that Texas has big-time question marks on both the offense and defensive line. If this were a program like Georgia, we would just kind of assume that the program could fill in these spots left by players that left for the NFL. Georgia does it every year. But Texas? There is some evidence that this Texas program has reached a new level. Steve Sarkisian certainly struggled in 2021 in his first season at Texas. They had a 5-7 record. And Texas's record wasn't excellent in his second year in 2022. They went 8-5. However, the underlying numbers were pretty strong. Of course, Texas made the college football playoff in each of the past 2 seasons. Here's a really interesting fact about this Texas program. Since the start of the 2022 season, neither the offense nor the defense has been outside of the top 15 by my metrics. So for 3 years, in my adjusted success rate, neither the offense or the defense has been outside of the top 15. Steve Sarkisian is starting to earn the benefit of the doubt. Before I started digging into college football, I thought it was an interesting question in the Big Ten whether Michigan or Indiana would be the better team. Michigan is a blue blood program, and they won a national championship in 2023. They certainly fell off last season, but you would expect better from a big-time program like Michigan. Indiana has been a long-time Big Ten doormat, but they had an outstanding season with Kirk Cignetti as coach last year, in his first year. They went 11-2 overall, and they made the 12-team college football playoff. In the preseason, I had Indiana worse than FBS average. By the end, they were a top 10 team. However, when a doormat makes a jump like this, you usually expect a lot of regression. So which team is better, Michigan or Indiana? Let's go to the wisdom of crowds. We'll look at something like the preseason AP poll. And this is actually a really powerful predictor of team strength because of this wisdom of crowds. And the preseason poll had Michigan ahead of Indiana. Then I started digging into these teams. In a previous episode of the 2025 preview series, I already made my case that Michigan was overrated at 14th. You can check out that episode of 3 overrated college football teams. And if anything, Indiana might be underrated at 20th in the preseason AP poll. And to understand why, you got to look at the NFL level talent that is potentially on this team. At the quarterback position, Curtis Rourke left for the NFL as a late-round draft pick last year. Now they're bringing in quarterback Fernando Mendoza from California. Want to take yards per pass attempt and adjust for strength of schedule? He is expected to throw for 6.3 yards per pass attempt against an average FBS defense. That's just a little bit worse than the 6.4 college football average. He did do better by the same analysis for passing success rate. I do think it's interesting to look at what the NFL scouts are saying. Jordan Reed of ESPN wrote a great article about the NFL level talent on many of these top college football teams. He has said that Mendoza has gotten a lot of high praise for NFL scouts and could possibly be a first rounder. There's a lot of talent on the rest of this team. There's players like wide receiver Elijah Surratt. He came over with Cignetti from James Madison last year to Indiana. 2 years ago at James Madison, he earned 2.92 yards per route run, which is excellent. Of course, you always have questions about whether a player can do that going from a Group of 5 level conference to a Power 5 conference. Elijah Surratt was awesome last year. He went for 2.76 yards per route run in the Big Ten. He is considered a day 2 NFL pick, which means he's projected to go in the second or third round. Wide receivers Miles Price and E.J. Williams are also on the NFL radar as late-round picks. On defense, it starts with edge rusher Mikhail Kamara. This is a player that was at James Madison for 3 years with Kirk Cignetti. He came over last year to Indiana with Cignetti, and his 10 sacks with Indiana was a career high. He is a mid-round NFL prospect. Cornerback D'Angelo Pons also came over from James Madison. He's undersized at 5 feet 9 inches tall, but he's still projected as a second or third round pick. Both the starting safeties at Indiana are also considered third-day picks. And I think it's really interesting that Indiana was in the sleeper section of this Jordan Reed article on ESPN for college football teams with NFL talent. There is a holdover of talent from a really good Indiana team that made the playoff last year. I think that makes for a really high floor for this Indiana team. It kind of reminds me of Michigan last season. They had holdover NFL talent from the national championship team the prior season. You had players like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, 2 defensive tackles that went in the first round of the NFL draft. Those guys are gone, and Michigan didn't make Jordan Reed's list of college football teams that have NFL talent. There might not be as much talent this year on that Michigan team, and they're looking to develop their very strong recruiting classes from this year and next year into that next set of players. That could be Indiana next year. When all these guys go to the NFL, Indiana could regress. But for this year, Indiana could really be sneaky good, especially if quarterback Mendoza is the real deal. Thank you for listening. My name is Ed Fang, your host for the Football Analytics Show. This is the last episode of the 2025 preview series, my daily series of podcasts to get you ready for football season. Can I ask a favor? If you enjoyed this preview series, can you tell a friend? Word of mouth has always been the best marketing for my solo business at The Power Rank. This preview series is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips in analytics. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. That's ThePowerrank. Also, this podcast will feature more of these solo episodes during football season. It's going to be the same short format, about 12 minutes, and I will give you probably 3 sections with actionable information in each section. This will happen every week. To make sure you get these episodes, subscribe to the Football Analytics Show wherever you get your podcasts.